Hello, my name is Dr. Switzer, and today we will be learning about revising and editing written work. Many students write a first draft and then protest when their teacher assigns the next step in the writing process, revision and editing. This step is to help students strengthen their assigned writing assignment and their writing skills for the future. Let us begin with defining revision and editing. Transforming a rough draft into good content requires revision, editing, and proofreading. Revision means getting the content right. It's about the big picture. Editing means making each sentence flow and choosing the right words, more specific, little picture. And proofreading is about ironing out grammar and spelling mistakes as well as checking punctuation. Next, we're going to compare revising versus editing. During revision, the rough draft is evaluated for the larger issues, which we already talked about, the big picture. You're looking at general content, organization, and tone of your writing. During editing, the paper is fine-tuned for specific content. The following questions for consideration during the revision process that you need to ask yourself is, who is your audience? Why are you writing to them? What will they be looking for? How do you come across? Will your audience be able to understand what you've written? Are you objective enough? Have you included enough information? And do you have more information than you need? I've included some common editing symbols. Your 3 lines that go under a lowercase will mean capitalization. Your slash, make the capital letter lower. Your arrow that's inserted for inserting a missing word or punctuation. Your squiggly line, as I like to call it, we're deleting a word or punctuation mark. The wiggly, which I like to call that, you're changing the order of the letters, flipping them around. Circle with a dot means add a period, and then the arrow with a comma underneath it means you're adding a comma. All right, revising. What it is. We've already talked about that, but we're going to talk a little bit more. Revising is finding and correcting your problems with the content, changing the ideas in your writing to make them clearer, stronger, more convincing, and looking at the big picture. Steps to help with revising. Find the main point. Identify your readers and your purpose. Evaluate your evidence. Save only the good pieces. Tighten and clean up your language. Eliminate mistakes in grammar and usage. Switch from writer-centered to reader-centered. So, for the first, number 1, find the main idea. What are you trying to say? When you read over your paper and you don't understand what you're trying to say, imagine someone who had outside eyes. They're not going to know either. So try to summarize your thesis and evidence you're using. Number 2, identify your readers and your purpose for writing. Does the body of your paper support your thesis? Do you offer enough evidence to support your claim? If you're using quotations from the text as evidence, did you cite them properly? Continuing with identifying your reader and purpose, what are you trying to do with the paper? Are you trying to argue, analyze information, evaluate something, or to apply it? Number 3, evaluate your evidence. Does the body of your paper support your thesis? Until you get this tightened up, your paper is not going to be a strong paper. Do you offer enough evidence to support your claim? Have your proof? If you're using quotations from the text, again, are you citing them properly? You have to give your authors credit if you're using sources. 4, save only the good pieces. Do all the ideas relate back to the thesis? Is there anything that doesn't seem to fit? If so, does the author need to be changing the thesis to reflect the idea or cut the idea? So sometimes it's hard as a writer. We have to go through and take out information that just isn't transitioning and making your thesis clear. Number 5, tighten and clean up your language. Do the ideas in the paper make sense? Sometimes we have to remember as we're writing, We know what we're trying to say, but when outside eyes read it, they're not going to understand what your thought process was when you wrote it. Are there unclear or confusing ideas or sentences? Read the paper out loud. Listen for awkward pauses and unclear ideas. And cut out extra words. Anything that's vague or misused words or repetitive words is another thing to cut out. Number 6, eliminate mistakes in grammar and usage. If something is wrong, make a note of it and look for the correction. 7, switch from writer-catered to reader-centered. Pretend to be reviewing someone else's work. What is the most successful part? What could make it better? What's the least successful part in your paper? What could you do to make it better? These are all questions in the writing process for revision. All right, now we're going to look at editing. Editing is finding and correcting problems with grammar, style, word choice, usage, punctuation. Editing focuses on the little picture, word level. Editing tips. Work with a clean printed copy. Have 1.5 spaces to allow room to mark corrections. Your teacher asks you to write it out before typing. She asks you to skip lines. She's doing this because she's already envisioning you're going to need space for your revision and editing process. Read your essay backwards. Be cautious of spell check and grammar check. Use a dictionary or written source. Read your essay out loud. Get feedback from peers. Work with a group member if you're assigned a group so they can look at it as well. All right, so let's practice. Directions. The following paragraph is confusing because it contains some sentence fragments and run-on sentences. So we're going to identify the fragments by highlighting them yellow. We're going to identify the run-ons by highlighting them green. And then we're going to rewrite the paragraph, revising each fragment and run-on to make the meaning clear. Remember, a fragment is words that do not form a complete thought, and run-on can be one or more sentences that get mashed together, which can cause confusion. So let's look at our paragraph. Scuba diving is a popular pastime. Scuba is an acronym. It stands for Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus. In the 15th century, Leonardo da Vinci designed an underwater diving suit. Functional equipment not developed until much later. The 18th century brought practical divers for underwater, such as diving suits, diving bells. Wearing these suits, divers could breathe underwater. Their mobility was limited. The 20th century had Jacques Cousteau and Émile Gagnon to solve the problem. Perfect the aqualung. The aqualung is a cylinder of compressed air. It is worn on the back and connected a mouthpiece. With an aqualung, divers have both air and mobility. And since 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans, scuba diving opened up a whole new world. All right, so we already know that it's incorrect, and it was a little difficult to read through to make sense. So first off, we're going to look at our fragments and identify those. So we have functional equipment not developed until much later. Okay, functional equipment, what kind? Not developed until much later is describing the functional equipment. We need a little bit more to go on. Such as diving suits and diving bells. That doesn't tell us anything. And perfected the aqualung. Who perfected the aqualung? And since 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans. Okay, what about it? See where we're going? Now let's look at our run-ons. All right, I left the highlighted area for our fragments. Now we have SCUBA is an acronym. It stands for Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus. What we need is a punctuation mark there to help that one. Wearing these suits, divers could breathe underwater. Their mobility was limited. All right, again, a little bit of punctuation will make it all better. So let's look at our revised paragraph. All right, so I included the punctuation and word changing or adding in red. Scuba diving is a popular pastime. Scuba is an acronym. It stands for Self-Contained Underwater Breathing Apparatus. In the 15th century, Leonardo da Vinci designed an underwater diving suit. Functional equipment would not be developed until later. The 18th century brought practical devices underwater, such as diving suits and diving belts. Wearing these suits, divers could breathe underwater, but their mobility was limited. The 20th century had Jacques Cousteau and Emile Gagnon to solve the problem. They perfected the aqualung. The aqualung is a cylinder of compressed air. It is worn on the back and connected to a mouthpiece. With an aqualung, divers have both air and mobility. Since 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by oceans, scuba diving opened up a whole new world. So going back and looking at our red editions, it makes the paragraph flow so much better. All right, so I just wanted to put these next to each other for y'all to kind of see how the difference in the flowing. All right, practice. We're going to look at some editing. Choose the answer choice, which is the best version of underlined sentence portions below. Our sentence is, Joe, my stepmother's brother, said he'd give me a ride. All right. Joe, my stepmother's brother, said he'd give me a ride. My stepmother's brother, Joe, said he'd give me a ride. And Joe, the brother of my stepmother, said he'd give me a ride. Joe, my stepmother's brother, said he'd give me a ride. All right, going through those sentences, a little bit hard there with grammar incorrect for reading. Look at them. If you selected D as the correct sentence, you are correct. Joe, my stepmother's brother, said he'd give me a ride. If we took out stepmother's brother and just read the sentence of Joe said he'd give me a ride, it is a perfectly good sentence. But because we have those commas there, it's set and it's a description towards Joe, this is known as an appositive. All right, sentence 2. I think I'd better get going now, he said. So let's pay attention because we got quotations. I think I'd better get going now, he said. B, he said he needed to get going. C, I think I'd better get going now, he said. Or D, I think I'd better get going now, he said. If we look at those and knowing our rules about quotations and in sentences, C is the correct answer. I think I'd better get going now, comma, he said. Right? The next sentence, number 3, please pack the following necessities: a toothbrush, a washcloth, and books for free time. Please pack the following necessities: a toothbrush, a washcloth, and books for free time. B, please pack the following necessities: a toothbrush, a washcloth, and books. C, the following necessities: pack a toothbrush, a washcloth, books for free time. Or D, please pack the following necessities: a toothbrush for brushing your teeth, a washcloth for washing your face, and books for free time. If we go back and we review them, and you selected B, that is correct. We have to make it flow. I've included my resources that I used for this lesson. I hope revision and editing is a little bit clearer. Have a good day.